Hey folks, jtbayer here, Abundant Living Ecuador, coming to you from our offices in Loja. Today is Thursday, March 23rd. Video on growing food, agriculture in Ecuador, food production, cultivation. So let's do the basics. Let's do the regions. Let's do a little bit of the crops. Let's talk pros and cons of regions and transportation, and maybe even a little bit of some varieties of strains and so forth. So, starting with the very basics, a lot of people are interested in agriculture or coming to Ecuador, and obviously for most people watching this video, that probably just means food production for your personal production, production for your own personal consumption. Some of you may be looking at it either from an investment standpoint or a business standpoint, for agribusiness, for like large scale production. So I'll hit on that a little bit as well. But first and foremost, Ecuador is an amazing place to grow food. You've got the year-round growing season. We're right by the equator, so we get very little change in temperature throughout the year. You've got some of the best soil in the world, some of the best water in the world, some of the cleanest air in the world. And with the infrastructure that's here now, you also have great roads to get your product to market if you're looking at it from a business standpoint. So that's number one. That's true throughout the country. Now, once you get past that, and actually stepping back first for 1 second, just a couple of facts. Ecuador wins awards all the time for their cacao and their chocolate. So some of the best cacao on the planet. So same thing with coffee. They get awards all the time for the quality of coffee. So some of the best cacao and coffee on the planet. And then bananas, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Ecuador produces the most bananas percentage-wise of any country in the world on the global market. So great place for agriculture. Beyond that, regions. So you've got the Galapagos. Outside of that, you've got three regions in Ecuador. That's coast, mountain, which is Sierra, and Amazonian, which is the Orient. So those three, and then microclimates within that everywhere, especially as soon as you get into the mountains where you get elevation change all the time. So microclimates absolutely everywhere, and obviously those microclimates affect crops and maybe we'll get in for a second, like the strains. There's so many different strains of each plant, each crop, which is really cool because a lot of them are just adapted for different regions. I've seen, for example, where I live in Loja, a lot, people might think it's too cold for things like bananas and avocados, but it's not. Bananas and avocados grow actually pretty well here, and that's partly because of the strains. And that's just an example, but they have sort of strains adapted to various regions, which is just kind of cool. I know a guy who's got 12 different varieties of bananas growing on his land, for example. Anyhow, so let's start on the coast. First of all, the majority of the agriculture in Ecuador, especially bananas, is on the coast. A ton of it is in the Sierra as well, but the banana production for export happens largely around the Machala area. The coast is great for agriculture. That being said, there is some drawbacks. The soil's great, and the areas that are not contaminated have great water, and obviously you're close to the port for export. The climate is warm all the time, so things grow really well. Amazing place for agriculture. That being said, there are parts of the coast that are a bit contaminated. If a place has been using pesticides for a lot of years, the soil certainly can, and water can have some pesticides in it. So you get in a little bit of those contamination issues depending where you are. There's certainly pockets that would be cleaner than clean. So there's that. And then there's price. So if you're buying let's say you like the climate, first of all, on the coast, which is warm and can be humid. And let's say you go inland a little bit, because a lot of the coast right on the water, unless you're in the north, a lot of it is pretty dry. So but let's say you go inland a little bit to a place that's very lush, very green, and you buy yourself, a plot, maybe a lot, or maybe 10 hectares, or whatever it is, you can find a beautiful spot where the weather is perfect for growing, where everything grows incredibly well, that's very pure, that has clean water. So I don't want to give you the wrong idea about that. But if you're talking like agribusiness, there'd be less options for a truly pristinely clean piece of land for growing. But there are options, and it's a great climate. That's the coast. Into the Sierra, into the mountains, you have lots and lots and lots and lots of different regions. So you have high elevations where apples grow better, potatoes grow really well, corn, depending on where you are, can grow really well, etc. You can certainly grow a lot of vegetables at those higher elevations. You have lower elevations where bananas are growing great, and avocados are growing great, and oranges. Any citrus grows really well. You see people growing noni, and you see people growing, obviously all sorts of vegetables. Excuse me. So the Sierra is good. It depends where you are as far as what crops you're going to grow. There's definitely happy mediums where you can grow basically the warmest weather stuff, like right up into mangoes and pineapples, but still not too hot for potatoes and corn and things of that nature. So there's definitely apples. There's definitely a happy medium. Not that everything on both sides of that spectrum would grow necessarily to world-class standards, but you could grow them. That's the Sierra, the mountains. The other thing about the Sierra that's worth noting, the soil's good and the growing is good. I would say it takes more work. It's not as ideal, the conditions, as it would be in parts of the coast and in the Orient, which we'll get into in a minute. To grow organic, for example, in the Sierra, depending on the crops and depending how good the soil is in the area, maybe take a little work, the organic fertilizer and, building up the soil and stuff. Not necessarily, but in a lot of places. In some parts of the coast and some parts of the Orient, especially, the growing conditions would be so ideal that it's literally, you throw a seed in the ground and it goes like this, and organic, and it's, just no pests. It's amazing. So, and I'll get into that in a second in the Orient. The other thing with the Sierra to think about is water. So the majority of the Sierra has a dry season, where you have to irrigate. So that's work as well. Not everywhere. Loja, for example, where I am, Cuenca, there's no dry season. Some places there isn't, but most of the Sierra, most of the mountains have a dry season. So water can be a premium, depending on where you are. There's a lot of irrigation canals, for example, in the Sierra. But definitely a great place to grow food as well. For my money, the Orient is really where it's at if you're serious about agriculture. So that's the Amazonian region. Number one, there's tons of water. So and it rains year round. So you get tons of rain, tons of water. So there's just water everywhere. There's rain. You don't ever have to worry about water. You don't ever have to worry about irrigation because it just rains plenty. So you're never irrigating ever. No one irrigates in the Orient. It's hot. Not everywhere. Again, microclimates. You can get elevated in the Orient and it cools down for sure. But it's hot in general. The soil is the best, I think, maybe in the world. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast things grow and the size of things. And it's not, I mean, you want evidence of this, just look at like the bug life. I mean, butterflies, like that, literally, ladybugs, that big. Incredible just plant and animal life. But as it pertains to agriculture, the soil is insane. Really cool. So, and I'll give you an example just to, sort of drive that point home. Nobody sprays anything in the Orient. Nobody sprays anything. And that's not because, people are necessarily super health conscious. It's just, and some people are, but it's just that there's no need to. It's just not necessary. Everything just grows so well, on its own. So, excuse me. So yeah, so that's the Orient, and the other. So yeah, let's talk about crops and climate in the Orient. So obviously, your hot weather stuff in the Orient grows great. So your tropical fruits, primo. Coffee grows great as well, and coconuts. You could grow pineapples. You can grow. Well, actually, I mean, you can grow absolutely anything except for super cold weather stuff. But what's interesting about so traditionally in the Orient, vegetables weren't really grown there because they grow so well in the Sierra. And in the Orient, the soil can be pretty moist from all the water and all the rain. So there's, and so, a lot of vegetables don't like that. So traditionally, vegetables weren't really grown. What people are doing now, if they want to grow vegetables, what they've realized is that if you just put a piece of plastic up and then you just do a little water management where you maybe do a little ditch where you're running off some of the water that's coming down from above where you're growing, you can grow all of your vegetables as well that are normally from the Sierra, and grow them faster and bigger and organic and just beautiful. So chard, kale, carrots, lettuce, you name it. So potatoes, whatever. Yucca is a very common crop in the Orient. So that's sort of climate and crops. What's really cool though also about the Orient is that the land is really cheap. So and nobody's doing this. So maybe it was very few years ago. We're talking 6 to 10 years ago. In the Orient, you couldn't do a big agricultural production there because the roads in the country weren't good enough to get your product to market. So that's one of the reasons that traditionally, and really up till now, there's no large scale agriculture in the Orient. There's lots of cultivation for local consumption, but there's no real large scale agriculture that happens almost all on the coast and a little bit in the Sierra. But now the roads are great. So there's sort of an arbitrage play there because the same piece of land, size and amount of flat and quality, and I would argue really even lesser quality on the coast versus the Orient. I mean, you're going to pay many times that amount. And I'm talking right now more for business people who maybe want to get into some sort of agricultural business. But there's great opportunities in the Orient for really large agricultural pieces of land that could be cultivated and for product lines, for export, for whatever. For people just want to live, same thing, really cheap. So you can get big properties really cheap. Put in your gardens, put in your fruit trees, create that sort of sustainable lifestyle that so many people are looking for, and do it all organic without having to build the soil up and do all that kind of stuff. So amazing place to Orient, certainly for agriculture, but I'm maybe being a little picky. It's certainly countrywide, a great place to grow food, with an exception here or there. Some of the more deserty areas on the coast obviously aren't ideal, but that's just an area here or there. I'm sure there's more stuff I could talk about, but it's long enough for tonight. So thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm Jesse Bayer of Abundant Living Ecuador. Find us at abecuador.com. If you're in the States or Canada, call us at 888-999-0948. You can reach me on my email at jtbayer, that's J as in John, T as in Thomas, Bayer like the aspirin, Bayer, at abecuador.com. And please like and share and all that good stuff, and hope to talk to you soon. Take care.